Hello, and welcome to the December 2025 ENSO seminar. So for the seminar today, we are very lucky to be joined by Xabier Barandiaran, who will be coming to us from the University of the Basque Country. Xabier, for the ENSO audience, probably needs no introduction. He has had a number of sort of significant classic papers published in the domain of the inactive approach, including this delightful sort of co-authored book with Ezekiel Di Paolo and Thomas Bormann, and on sensory motor life, which sort of really introduces the core principles and the fundamental approaches to the premises and some of the crucial generalizations, in fact, of inactive thinking from organic through to habitual and skilled behavior. Xabier did his original philosophy degree in the University of Deusto. Have I pronounced that? I probably mispronounced that.
Yeah.
The evolutionary and adaptive systems masters in Sussex, as so many inactive researchers have done, and then a PhD with Alvaro Marino in the University of the Basque Country. So Xabier has, through a somewhat roundabout route, come home. And a number of postdocs across a wide range of different labs and with different researchers. So, Xabier, you're very welcome. Obviously, your work on agency in particular, and your subsequent work on habits and habit formation and so on have been crucial to the way inactive thinking has developed over the past few years. And it's wonderful to be able to get you and present here an ENSO seminar for us.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really great to be here. Actually, I'm very excited and I'm very grateful for you, Marek, and also Matthew Egbert. I know you both have taken a very long commitment to this series of seminars that have been a big reference, and it's an invisible work. It takes time, energy to fix days, to follow people around, catch them up. I haven't been an easy speaker of the ENSO seminar. I had to change dates for different reasons. And I really appreciate this invisible work of taking care of the infrastructures of knowledge. And certainly for the inactive community, this is a big reference. I mean, sometimes if somebody asks, what is an activism? And is a broad family of theories, perhaps just everything that's shown up on the ENSO seminars is an activism. It will be a good definition. So thanks for taking care for so long and so nicely for this common resource that you guys keep running. So, and it's an honor for me to be here, obviously. So yeah, maybe it's time for me to share the screen as well.
Sure, yeah, we can get right to it. So yeah, if yeah, I'll so invite you to sort of kick things off with generative mid-tended cognition and artificial intelligence, thinking with thinking things.
Exactly.
Say this very quickly, several times.
Yeah, well, thank you, everybody. I'm not totally sure, but I will share this as an open question at the end, whether this term mid-tended is the adequate one. Thinking with thinking things, I think it's a funny and insightful summary of what we're going to be talking about, and what part of our everyday life experience is after the quick spread of large language models and generative AI in general. But I was perhaps thinking that an easier way to understand the title of this talk could be intentional agency in the age of generative AI, more broadly. We'll see how far we can get and the shape of it. But it's all based on a few papers that are well linked and identified on the ENSO seminar website, and probably on the description of the YouTube video as well. And the main paper is Generative Mid-Tended Cognition and AI. That's what I kept the title. But I've been working with Lola Almendros as well on another paper that is also referenced, which is the one that triggered the whole thinking about large language models and generative AI from an enactive point of view, and also a work in progress with Tiago Rama. We already submitted the paper and is available as a preprint on goal-directed and teleological behavior that also develops a little bit towards the intentional agency concept that is very relevant for today's talk. But I wanted to take the opportunity also to acknowledge that the whole thing perhaps started with Marta Pérez-Verdugo. She joined a research project that I was the principal investigator long ago. It's just over now, and Marta is about to present her PhD thesis, which she already submitted, and it's is an honor, and it's been a pleasure to be her supervisor. And but when he came here, she had a paper about to be submitted, and which is this one, situating transparency and extended cognition approach, where and she asked me as a new supervisor to have a look at the paper. Obviously, I did with pleasure, and I thought it could benefit from an example that could be motivating and illustrating her main thoughts. And we came out with this idea of a tennis racket that was anticipating the movements of the player and kind of even playing for you. You could still take different positions and make body movements that the racket would anticipate and complete the action. And this was challenging as an example at the time, very fantasy example, because the racket would be super complex with small propulsors or something, jet-like mini things to move your hand and everything, and be quick, and sensors and everything. So it was a fantasy. But time passed, and suddenly ChatGPT appeared, and before that, GPT in general, and the whole revolution of attention mechanisms in transformer architectures, and the whole large language model revolution. And suddenly we got something similar. And Marta and myself kept working on technology and autonomy, and finally wrote this paper that I mentioned before. I have to acknowledge also a very important another. So if anybody's looking to follow up this line of research on enactive intentionality and technology, I think, this paper by Marta is interesting. The ones that I mentioned before as well. Two others, one by Marek himself, which was very inspired on enactive theories do it on purpose. I think that's the title, on goal-directedness and the whole thing, which I think is very relevant. And I rediscovered somehow, because I never read this paper, I have to confess, but I went to the talk that Ezekiel gave long ago on interactive train travel, which is perhaps the title and the abstract, and one of the goals of the paper masks a very interesting and deep theory of intentionality and social interaction that it's very relevant. But I haven't finished rereading the paper, so I'm really sorry. I should have done my homeworks properly. But I think there are very deep connections with that paper and the work I'm going to present in here as well, and the way in which it can be expanded to encompass the generative digital ecology that we are immersed ourselves. I also wanted to start with a small story. Actually, I was looking for an image for the ENSO website that was not AI generated, and I didn't have a nice picture of mine. So I love drawing diagrams, but for this particular one, I do have some, but I thought they looked ugly because there was such a nice diagrams and pictures on the ENSO seminar website that so I asked ChatGPT, what would be a nice classical picture? It came out with this idea that I took, and then I got deeper into the myth itself of Pygmalion and Galatea. And I have a version of this myth updated to nowadays. That's something I like to do on my courses, to update Greek myths. So this is the myth of Pygmalion and Galatea, updated. Stanford University professor Pygmalion doesn't want to have any postdoc assistant. He thinks they're all imperfect, and he only wants to work with perfect, pure people that they can really tune and be perfectly synchronized with. So he has decided to create a perfect library with his writings and those of his predecessors and the really deep references he fully agrees with. And Pygmalion is often seen to be talking to his library, takes books and has out loud conversations with books, which is not really new, but some people think that writing made this possible, and is partially part of philosophy. But one day, Pygmalion comes because he's a Stanford, Silicon Valley. There is this corporate funded party by Google, and Aphrodite is a Google engineer, and she has a conversation with Pygmalion, and Pygmalion confesses that he would really like to talk to Galatea, like really, to his library. And well, Aphrodite spends a lot of energy, also a lot of unpaid work in Pakistan and somewhere else through Amazon Tark and everything, to fine-tune an artificial intelligence called Galatea AI, and installs it in Professor Pygmalion's office PC. Next day, as usual, Professor Pygmalion goes into the office, starts talking to his library, and the library responds, like it's really responding, it's really talking. 9 months later, they wrote a book entitled Paphos, which is the son of Galatea and Pygmalion in the original myth, and this is the most cited book in Cyprus, whatever. So this image is one image where Pygmalion is talking to a statue made of marble, and the conversation is real for him, both previous to the conversion of Galatea into a real human being by Aphrodite, and also after. So this ambiguity between how textual bodies become partners in conversations, still to be elucidated. What kind of partners are they? Is something that's happening to all of us with the generative AI, and deserves philosophical attention for sure, and also a standpoint from an activism and theories that put so much emphasis on autonomy, right? So here we go. Let me put you an example that's less controversial, very common. We're having a conversation with more people, and suddenly the term doesn't come to my mind. For example, let's call this heterocomplete instead of autocompletion. This heterocompletion. I'm talking to someone. The list is very inspiring, but his writing is too. I can't find the term. Somebody says abstruse. Oh yeah, his writing is too abstruse. Thanks. That's exactly what I meant, right? So here we have a social setup and a conversation where participants in the conversation are capable of delivering, anticipating the term you needed, and providing it to you when you were blocked or just couldn't find the right term, and you adopt it. You take it as yours, and then you put it in your own sentence. It completes your sentence. This happens occasionally, and most of our actions in the world, as Malafouris and material culture reminds us, they're kinds of intentionality that involve things, material things, building clay, There's a conversation going on there between the matter, the clay, and the artist, the artisan. The making of the pottery is an interactive, deeply interactive process. It's not that I have the 3D blueprint and I send it to the 3D printer. I'm negotiating continuously with matter that shows me potentialities, and basically, to use the Malafuri's phrase, thinking is thinking. So if we bring both together and the new technological context, we are thinking with thinking things now. So generative AI is a thinking thing. It's not the passive, although matter can be actively understood too, but it is much more active than clay, almost as active as a genuine human intervening in the conversation, giving me the terms that I needed to complete my sentence. And so somehow generative AI is active digital matter that adapts to our context and to our personal history sometimes, and anticipates suggestions or full actions for a scene, or responding to what we want to do, what we intend to do. And this is a situation that deserves absolute philosophical attention, because it's transforming our lives, and also the way and the ontology, the traditional ontology we had about intentionality, authorship, autonomy, etc. So we live in the era of generative AI. There are tools, thinking things around us in all types. Some of them are more conversational, like ChatGPT kind of thing, Mistral, Gemini, Chinese models, extraordinary, from DeepSeek to Quang to Kimi K2. I mean, there are many different ones. Others surface on canvas style digital spaces. So you are painting, or it's not so much conversational, but in the creative space, digital space, they intervene in different manners. And others take an agentic character, meaning that they independently, I don't want to say autonomously, but independently of human intervention, they do things for us, interpreting our intentions, and we enter into feedback loops with them as assistants, and so on. So this ecology is still to be settled. We are living in a Cambrian explosion of different types of paradigmatic uses, and none of them has been fully stabilized. We don't know what the future will deserve, but we have from conversational agents to copilot kind of intervention on our spreadsheets or design canvas, to more externalized, almost minion style, assistants that are also faulty, and we are still on an earlier stage of these technologies. Yeah, I'm not going to invest much time on how they work, because in one of the papers that I've recommended for this session, on the transforming agency one, we have a long explanation for philosophers. What is perhaps interesting is to see that generative AI works in loops, or auto-regressive loops, iteratively, inputting their own output, and which is very inactive in a sense. And also they can bring into the functioning a wide context of previous conversations, but also material. We can upload PDF files and so on. And also, although this is very expensive and is not yet accessible for many, they can be fine-tuned for specific purposes, and also on a specific data. Just big corporations do it for to attune the artificial intelligence system to their corporate identity and data and practices, and this will become relevant later. And also, as it's been said, part of the training is focused on predicting the next token being a unit of here intelligent processing, usually a word or part of a word, but it could be a pixel on a painting, or a chunk of sound that is minimally meaningful to a human and also to the machine that's processing it. These are important aspects to consider. And perhaps it's good to understand how these machines have been anthropomorphized. We know it's delicate and incorrect ontologically to take them to be proper humans, although this was already an early claim by Google engineer that some of the creatures might have been conscious and deserve rights and everything. I'm not going to go into that. There are perhaps more important ways in which these systems have been anthropomorphized. First is that they are like human mannequins. They have been shaped through a lot of human expression. Not a lot, like almost everything that humans have ever written and has been digitalized. And so, of course, they are already anthropomorphized through the process of learning iteratively and repeatedly in trillions of operations. It's just a massive amount of anthropomorphizing effect of going through human-generated content. And yeah, I don't want to go into details of, but perhaps the embodiment is important, because as an activist thinkers, obviously the body is very important. We know that these systems don't have a living or a lived body. Obviously, they are cheap, sustained things. They're not in the cloud. This is an important aspect as well. What type of embodiment they have in the physical sense of it. But they also lack sensory motor embodiment. Most of the ones we use today, this is going to change. It's changing fast. Multimodality is already there, but it's still a kind of passive multimodality. It's video and audio files that are fed into these systems to train them. But there are also research programs that are very successful and probably soon integrated into our experience of this kind of generative AI, whereby these systems already have action perception loops built into the training in a systematic, massive manner. And yeah, so just let's not forget that there is behind this a very energy and human and nature consuming industry that is feeding and sustaining these machines that are in the cloud as a kind of ethereal, non-material thing. But perhaps it's also important to notice what the training corpus. But corpus means body in Latin, and all this textuality is an intrinsic constitutive part of these large language models. It could happen differently. Maybe there are somewhere an artificial in a parallel world, maybe not. I don't think this is possible, but rationalistic thinking makes it conceivable for some. Let's put Jerry Fodor, for example, as an example, that you could bootstrap. Well, perhaps Jerry Fodor is not the best example, but you could bootstrap rationally a thinking being by deducing from some early experience with the world a whole systematic logic structure of intelligent action. But that's not the case. We had to train these systems with gigantic, enormous, almost totalitarian amounts of human-generated data. And this is the corpus. And I don't think we have a good theory of what that body means. I mean, what is this kind of body that is all the signs that have been digitalized that are the result of human experience? I think this is an open avenue to think. And also the reshaping of this through human reinforcement learning and also machine reinforcement learning with feedback. And there are processes there that deserve attention. But I just want to focus on the fact that these systems aren't agents in a deep sense of it. And this is very important. Although the term agent is the new hype now, that is the new wave of generative artificial intelligence, is that they're going to do the work for us, not with us, and they're going to become autonomous agents in a sense. Obviously, from the inactive point of view, there is no hope for this, at least in the current configuration, for many different reasons that we explore on the paper with Lola Almendros. And well, we have a split ontology, which it's perhaps going to have to be reconsidered. But up to today, we had a world of physics and mechanics, a world of events, of forces, of equilibrium, of laws, and a world of agents with actions, intentions, goals, and norms. And it's totally different when a car breaks down. We can push it and fix it, but pushing and trying to fix a horse is a totally different type of game. And underlying this game is a different organization of matter, really. We're not gonna take the spiritualist or supranaturalist point of view. There are ways to naturalize agency, obviously, but they're very different to the ways we have conceptualized traditional physics and mechanics. But now this is blurring. We have robots that might be steering living systems and fighting with natural autonomy or real agents, or including humans. And this situation deserves also some attention, and this talk is aimed to contribute in this direction somehow. There's a long tradition of confronting cybernetic systems, try to declare genuine agency or purposefulness or intentions to machines, and more naturalistic, biologically grounded approach to intentionality and autonomy and value, etc. And simply, large language models don't accommodate the minimal requirements for agency that I've explored in different papers. They don't make up for self-generated individuals. They don't generate their own normativity. They can respond to, and they are normatively shaped, but they don't generate it internally, and therefore they have serious problems on being sensitive to norms. And interactionally asymmetric they sometimes are, more and more, but they fundamentally on their structure passive. They have no internal state as such, as an architecture, and so it's very difficult to qualify them as genuine agents. So, but what are they? So in a sense, we can let me put this version of what they are first. Perhaps interesting to look at the distinction that John Searle made between genuine intentionality and derived intentionality. So derived intentionality, just to put it at very simple example, the stop sign in the street. So it has a meaning, but it doesn't have the meaning on itself. It's just a passive piece of metal painted in red, but it's humans that have to interpret it in order to give it the meaning. So we produce it with the intention to operate as a meaning carrier, but you always need a human to interpret and provide the genuine meaning to this sign. So this is a first order derived intentionality object, right? It doesn't have intrinsic intentionality, but it has derived. It depends on a human. But here's the thing. Large language models are purpose structured through all this data that they have been fed with, which this data is purpose. It manifests human purpose on our writings, etc. Is purpose bounded, but the type of reinforcement learning they have been systematically subject to, and they are purpose prompted because we declare what we want them to do and they operate accordingly. But they are not purposeful. They aren't purposeful in the sense that genuine agency is. So one way to understand these systems is that they are third order derived intentionality systems. They can generate derived intentionality streams. They can write symbols, signs, based on prompt intentionality, based on a human asking, intentionally declaring some will to be done, a painting or write me an email about whatever. And they do it through the traces of structured intentionality in the training data and this intentional structuring of training feedback by humans and other machines. So these are very particular kinds of beings, third order derived intentionality machines. And we can have, we can project ghost-like properties. It's a phantasmatic automaton somehow. In the two senses of ghost. On the one hand, these automata bring the dead corpus to life, right? So they are not fully alive, but they are kind of undead, like zombies of previously living human textualities and expressions of human intentions. But they are also ghosts in another sense, like as an enacted other. So whenever anybody has experience of a ghost, I don't believe in ghosts, but I believe in the experience of a ghost, because you can truly have this kind of conversation with somebody that is not there by amplifying perhaps sounds or imagining, and just having incorporating a non-present other into your own conversation. The linguistic body is a perfect book to understand how this is possible from an enactive point of view. But this time we have excorporated the phantom. So in this, this is what Galatea is, right? Unlike me having a conversation that I'm fantasizing with Plato or any other philosopher, I can now talk to a large language model that is acting as Plato, right? So this is something new and deserves attention. So part of the goal of this talk was to provide a new concept, or perhaps an old concept with a new name. I don't know. I think it's new, but also I have to confess this paper was very quickly written in almost a couple of weeks, in a kind of a sprint. Although obviously there are many thoughts that came together, and there's such a vast literature being written about large language model nowadays that it's impossible to know whether somebody else said it differently or perhaps even better than this. But anyway, let's take this road and see where it leads us. Traditional accounts of intentionality are very much like linear causality based. So just to take Davidson, obviously this is a caricature or a simplified version more than a caricature. I respect this tradition, but it is very limited on how we can account for the richness of human intentionality. And the original proposal was that whenever a person has a desire and the belief that doing phi as an action would satisfy this desire, and the belief and the desire trigger in the correct manner the action of fin, phi is intentional. So as an action, this is this traditional theory. Well, this is perhaps illuminated at the time, but certainly a bit poor on the kind of complexities and the feedback loops and the embodiment of intentional action and the complexities that bring about the living body and the interacting embodiment of continuous being in the world, which is much richer and certainly non-linear and certainly not dependent on events that happen inside a school that are the linear cause of an intentional action. And so enactivism has a different take on this. And I'll need long time to explain how we can get from goal-directed to teleological action to intentional action and to generative agency. But let's start from the basics of sensory-motor life, which is the idea that we have sensory-motor schemes or habits, complexes or structures of sensory-motor coordination patterns that are plastic and precarious and are generated by agent side, support the structures, muscles, neurons, skeletal synergies, configurations, and environment side, support the structures, chairs, pencils, tools, ecological arrays of perceptual environmental structures, and so on. Both together bring about a structured action. These schemes can be nested into action networks, right? And altogether, they constitute our identity as sensory systems, which is precarious, and we have to act to maintain and sustain our precarious network of sensory schemes and habits. And this is one way of understanding individuality or processes of self-individuation in the sensory motor domain. And in the paper that I mentioned at the beginning with Tiago Rama, goal-directed and teleological behavior, and we make a step further saying, well, goals are kind of conditions of satisfaction that shape the transition between these sensory schemes. And they are obviously also plastic and partially, if not fully, reshaped as the action unfolds, pretty much like an attractor, but an attractor in an elastic blanket where a ball is rolling down in the sensory motor space. So this is very abstract, takes too long to explain. Perhaps a different talk would deserve a full explanation for this. But we can move on and say, well, we have intentionality as the capacity to modulate the normative landscape of teleological tensions that make up a sensory motor agent. And generativity would be a kind of intentional action that is, let's put it, creativity. We didn't want to use creativity on the title of this talk and in general on the paper, because we think creativity has to be done by humans. But generativity seems okay. Both machines and humans could generate something. That's a middle ground that we could agree that both deserve the capacity to be generative. And so is the recursive intentional, or perhaps not fully intentional, agency over the production of an object that is progressively sedimented into the environment. So generative agency would be writing, pottery, arranging my kitchen, or building a house. So when we engage with machines on generative productive processes, how can we approach this phenomenon? Traditionally, we had extended mind hypotheses and material engagement theories, for example. True, these technologies could be understood as extensions of human activity, but it's more than that, because they're so active, they're so anticipating, they're so context sensitive, they're so tuned and predictors of what we are doing as while we engage with them, that the traditional notebook where a patient with difficulties on memory, with Clark and Chalmers' extended mind, taking notes on my notebook as an extended memory system, is very passive. The clay in Malafuri's material engagement theory is very, very passive compared to a large language model. And so perhaps social interaction is a better model or approximation to the type of relationship we have with these machines. So well, through the chat infrastructure, obviously, it's kind of Turing test. Almost, we are almost incapable of distinguishing large language model from a human person. But it's less than that. We know there are not human beings. And for the enactive theory of social interaction, is fundamental that both agents engaging in social interaction are autonomous on their own and bring a new type of emergent autonomy to the interaction that transforms their autonomy. But it is fundamental on the being social that they both are also autonomous before and during and after the process of socially engaging. So this being more than extended and less than social is what we named midtended agency. So I very much like this quote by Ernest Hemingway, who used to say, probably it's not true that he ever said this, but this kind of quote that becomes famous: "Write drunk, edit sober." And nowadays we almost do the same. So what? Because what does it mean? Write drunk, where you don't really know what you're doing. Edit sober. You own the text after the fact by correcting, and you need this creativity that drinks or alcohol or any other drug can provide you, where you lose your own identity a little bit, but you become super creative, and then you edit it because most of it is bullshit, and the end process is your book, is your own. You are the author of it. But now it's a bit more like let the large language model write and then edit yourself, or the contrary. Sometimes is I write myself and let the large language model edit it. The end result is very often equally adopted, or I recognize myself on the product, pretty much like perhaps Hemingway was recognizing himself on the final product, even if he doesn't even remember what he wrote when he was drunk. Wittgenstein had this quote, which was inspiring for our paper as well. I really do think with my pen, because my head often knows nothing about what my hand is writing. And this dual process, we already have experience. Whoever has been writing for longer than a few months or weeks knows. I mean, I'm thinking about my daughter that's learning to write. Maybe she doesn't have this experience, but almost anybody does that. You write something and you say, no, that's not what I meant. I mean, it's not exactly. Or sometimes you reread things and you say, wow, that's so good. Or there is this kind of feedback dialectics between the writing process as if it was automatic, not autonomous, but automatic, and your own autonomy as an author, working recursively on it to bring about an authored end result. So large language models are intervening on this. This is a sensation we all had before the advent of large language models, but now we have the intervention at different degrees, depending on the kind of user you are, or how much you want to experiment, or how much you have incorporated these technologies on your life. But it is for many this extended autocomplete experience of generative activities in humans. If we look at it from the perspective of predictive coding, that this I missed this revolution in the history of cognitive science, because it was just the period that it was away from research in cognitive science, this predictive coding, free energy principle thing. But and I'm not an expert at all on it. But from the point of view of predictive coding, is kind of crazy, because it's like these machines are injecting predictive efferent signals into our body in the extended sense of my keyboard and screen extended body, right? Or the environment delivering predictions to what I'm going to do. So it's this kind of a short circuiting of urgency is what's taking place. So I'm going to move into a formal definition of this midtended, with reaching the discussion section. So I'm about to finish soon with this philosophical characterization. So in this picture, we have a human being interacting through a computer, and some people call it grounded cognition, or the sensorimotor simulative feedback loops inside the brain, the embodied cognition, or the proprioceptive feedback, the body as a meaning producer in this interaction, the inactive, more extended into the environment, sensorimotor contingencies, world involving activity. Okay, this inactive cognition, right? Loop A. Uh, Loop B is generative AI intervening on our working space, a computer, and the nesting of both would be midtended cognition. So we provide a definition on the paper. I'm gonna break it down. So let X be a cognitive agent. Uh, Let Y be a generative system, maybe a generative AI. We could put another human there too, and we will in some examples to come. But since generative was generic enough, let's put a machine there. And let's say it be the cognitive product. Let's just for the sake of it, a text that I'm writing, a paper. So mid-tension occurs when Y makes generative interventions in the process of producing Z, and those interventions are constitutive of X intentional generation of Z. So they are adopted, owned by X, and X experiences some agency or authorship over this product. This would be the definition of mid-tended cognition. Not fully intended, because there are contributions that come in from outside of the usual intentional sensory-motor action embodied action loop, but not extended either in the traditional. So this is why we said, well, mid-tended, somewhere in the middle, not intended, not extended, somewhere in the middle. And we make ours, perhaps because these tokens or these generations from the machine, sometimes because they have a predictive fit, because that's exactly what I meant. It just went there. Sometimes because we surrogate, we delegate, we trust the machine. What does something mean? I need a definition, whatever, and I take it. Sometimes, perhaps, and this is more something to talk about in the discussion, by familiarity, but by trust, but laziness, but self-doubt. Maybe I don't trust myself, but I trust the machine, so I'll take the machine's suggestion as mine. This can also operate. This is part of the theory that's weak, and we need to develop it in more detail. But I think there are important aspects of what, why, and how we take some of the suggestions as ours and how we incorporate them into the process. So perhaps the next extension of this theory, and now I'm going to put some examples, is to see mid-tended intentionality or mid-tended cognition as having two dimensions: the depth of the integration. So in the level 0 will be the final product. I have the large language model working overnight, and it gives me the next book based on my whatever. Maybe just a prompt, maybe all my history of writing in the past, maybe a wider context. But it could give me a paragraph, or the next word, or the next sensory motor loop, just intervention in a very fine-grained sensory motor loop intervention, not just a full perceptual complete word. Or it could be, there could be an intervention in the proprioceptive bodily feedback, or it could be kind of neuronal intervention, right? All these are potentially possible on the depth axis. On the width axis of generative intentionality, we have the degree of sensitivity to context and history. So the lowest level will be just the current token, word, sound, just or minimal action, motor command, something super minimal. It could be the current sentence, current action in a wider sense. I don't know. This could be measured in seconds if you want. Also, the integration, perhaps. Could be current work, the full text I'm writing. Could be the work context, or everything I've written in all my messages, my emails, or the full personal context or institutional context. Maybe everything has been written, and everything that all the emails of my research group, like a much wider context. And so we can have two-dimensional space here between the depth and the width. And in gray here is where most of current generative technology intervenes, from one token auto-completion as I write an email. Gmail is capable of providing the next word, or sometimes completing the sentence. But I could also have a conversation that's more tune-taking style, where I take things from the other person and incorporate them into my own intentional conversational space. We can have jazz improvisation, perhaps with machines, but we know with humans that are generatively more fine-tuned to the sensory-motor level, where vibrations of guitar are tuned to the visual feedback from the audience and my other jazz partners, and there is a generative collective intentionally emerging situation there. There could be, and they already are close to ask delicate philosophical and ontological questions, interventions in the brain, particularly in patients with deep paralysis. I don't want to support any company, but some of you might be familiar with direct deep neuronal connections to computers that actually use generative AI technologies to anticipate potential terms that the patient is willing to say, and things like that, and still not intervening on the brain itself, but maybe soon possible. And so if you look at this right side, I've called this kind of generative intentionality, where very fine-grained integration takes place in introtension. So the machine, that this will be challenging for any account of intentionality being owned when the intervention happens at the neural level, for example. It's a conversation when the conversation takes, when the interaction and the integration takes at a final product, final sentence, kind of complete sentence exchange. And in the middle between introtension and conversation is this mid-tension space that is being rediscovered, recreated, digitalized, and automatized by generative AI. So just to discuss a few of these consequences of this notion and this new reality, well, we are going much deeper than the current token. We are going deep into the brain, into proprioception, and this raises many questions, as we will see, of authenticity and ownership of action and everything, that are worth considering ethically and ontologically. Is it worth that we should we stand on the shoulders of generative giants? This, I think, is also a nice thing, or a nice way of putting it, right? After all, this is all general intellect. I mean, this kind of artificial intelligence is already ours in the our meaning humanity level. Some part of humanity has been, a big part has been left out, those that were not sufficiently represented on the digitalized signs that we have produced as humans. But the fact that we have this kind of library that talks, this human compressed knowledge that unfolds in a manner that is sensitive to our writing or our doing, is an amazing thing, and it can democratize or level up many people's skills and capacities, generative capacities, and that could be a good thing. It all depends on how we do it and how we avoid also creating a kind of generative class. So these are old ideas from the early 90s, and when some theoreticians, I forgot the names, but they thought that the working class was going to turn into a creative class, super positive, well-paid people that are using their creativity to contribute to society. It was a myth that never happened fully. I mean, a few of us, I could include myself, we are privileged enough to be paid to do creative stuff, But now this hype about how these machines could level everybody up to this creative class might perhaps show a dark side on a generative class that is plugged into the computer to take care of it, to provide the genuine normativity of real intentional agents into a machine that is otherwise automatized and alienating for the cognitive worker. And we are soon gonna see how this generative AI industry is gonna start monetizing. The early days, sometimes the early years of some digital technologies, they're just not profitable. Some social networks like Twitter, been there for years, had a very high value in the stock market, uh, but they were never profitable, and but they're still accumulating value as an anticipation of what could be, how they could be exploited. And this is the situation now. Before a social network or massively adopted digital technology is profitable, the goal of the startup or the companies behind it is to increase engagement and the amount of users. Once they are locked in into a platform that is almost monopolistic, then you extract real value from these users. So we haven't reached that level yet. We are still to see how it's going to work. But one way to put it, or one way to fear the future, is that when monetizing ChatGPT, just to put an example that is totally non-profitable right now, we are going to see the emergence of an intention economy. If we've been now in the social network era, submitted and divided and psychologically destroyed by an attention economy, what could come of an intention economy where our intentional action is intertwined with machine suggestions? Well, it's not easy, it's not difficult to see. There's a big market there, not just as previously with advertising and suggesting things that we can perceive and alter our will or psychology, but on the kind of intention part, not the attention part, but the intention part, more on the action part. Whenever we're going to take a decision, or whenever agents that we trust, we're going to take them for us, or we get involved in these loops, people with money might get a chance to place their decisions into us. As academics, imagine you are using Gemini or DeepSeek to write a paper, and suddenly, you need some references for something, and your large language model that's already tuned to you starts suggesting people you should quote or cite or reference on a specific idea that you are writing. And but there could be many people you cite, right? Because sometimes for one idea you could have a different variety of people. Not all of them come to your mind, but the suggestion that the machine is making might be biased. Maybe Stanford University is paying Gemini to increase the probability of suggesting Stanford University researchers being cited. We can see how this goes. Obviously, for any product, if you use smart glasses that project suggestions, and you are deciding the wine in a huge wine menu that you are almost lost in it, well, there you have a nice point where your attention and intention can be shaped with generative AI to a wine that surprisingly you are going to enjoy very much, because the machine's been learning from your tastes, and is a good decision you would have taken yourself had you known how good this wine was, right? So we might get deeply intertwined with these machines to a point that challenges authenticity. And this is also something that's very in need of thinking. Who am I when my self completion has been machine driven, machine suggested, intertwined? This is complicated. How much of a cognitive atrophy we're gonna develop if already calculators and phone memories have destroyed my capacity to do mathematical exercises and to remember. I just only remember one phone number or two, but I used to remember a few dozen. And what's happening now? If the industrial revolution has brought with it the need of humans to go to the gym, this is ridiculous. We work, and when we finish work, we go to the gym to do on the gym the physical exercise we don't do anymore on our workplace. And so maybe now when we come out of our work, we're gonna have to go to the gym first, the physical gyms, and then to a kind of a psychological gym as well, to compensate for the lack of creativity or the atrophy of our generative capacities ourselves. It's difficult to tell, and this might lead to a global collapse on creativity as well. And there is a big ongoing discussion about how much large language models can do without a generation of genuinely creative work by humans. And well, this is all I very much like, and I'm going to finish with this kind of negative dialectics proposed by Douglas Rushkoff, who said, look, in order to find authenticity, I'm using large language models. I start writing something, and I ask ChatGPT whether this is okay, and or to complete it. And if the completion corresponds with what I was going to say, fuck, I just tried to say the contrary, because that meant that I was being driven by the average statistical mean of what is more non-authentic of me to say, right? So we could even use kind of jujitsu of creativity and authenticity, these machines, to discover and be forced away from the standard mean and find ourselves on the most genuine, unpredictable form of self and authenticity we can build. So just to conclude, our digital environments include now thinking things. We're continuously thinking with thinking things. These generative third order derivative intentional systems are a challenge to the traditional ontology and the way we understand and do things. These hybrid cognitive processes are neither fully addressed by extended cognition approaches nor by social cognition and active approaches so far. We thought it was useful to provide this notion of generative mid-tension or mid-tended agency as an active integration of generative AI and human autonomous creativity, creation, so that you own the final result, but it's not fully yours in origin. And these technologies are increasing in depth and width. And this is something we really need to take care of. Is mid-tension the right term? I don't know. But it's certainly interesting as a phenomena and deserves attention. And the concept we try to clarify in these papers, I think it's worth the effort. How should we regulate this? It needs some kind of regulation. How do we understand ourselves? Is there any emancipatory direction that we can push technology? The very notion of self-completion through another is another that's not a human, but is the sedimented effect of many human activities. This is our very challenging and funny. And finally, we need an enactive theory of this digital corpus, I think, of Galatea's marble. So yeah, that's the story for today. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Marek, for holding the session.
Thank you, Xavier. Thank you very much. So, there is obviously a sort of a very great, enormous amount there to unpack. And I suspect we won't be able to do it justice. I have, though, I guess I'll keep an eye on the chat on the live stream just to feed in any comments that come up there. I guess in the first instance, there's kind of two very broad, and these are very much comment rather than questions in the first instance, or observations, just sort of taking a step back. One is, of course, the um, so much of the discussion here requires what you called out in the middle of the talk, which is essentially that we sort of suppress, step back, or just ignore the immensity of the ecological and humanitarian cost that it takes to create these things. And I guess we should possibly be just a little bit aware of, in examining the kind of recent developments on it, in terms of sort of scaling them up and improving them. The costs have tended to increase exponentially rather than become more efficient over time, which is to say that the sort of accelerationist apparent trajectory of these things are only going to get better, would at the moment seem to come at increasing costs rather than costs collapsing and becoming more efficient and effective over time, which is it's sort of I don't know, it's a different kind of ghost that haunts the conversation. And the second, I think, is sort of scientifically and philosophically more interesting, and it is just the way in which this fits into the general context of our understanding of intention. And I'm reminded of Ezekiel's paper and the general thrust of Ezekiel's paper on adaptivity teleology. You know, when is I can never remember. There's four terms, and I can never remember what they all are and in what order. The sort of classic 2005 paper in which Ezekiel introduced the issue of adaptivity into sense making. And crucially, it was that as we approach the boundary of viability, any organism will start to produce new distinctions that were not apparent before. That essentially, as we sort of press up against our limits, we become more sensitive to distinctions that were just sort of not clear and not as effective before. And this would seem to be an example of that, where the basic principles of participatory intentionality, shared intentionality of various kinds, has been explored and we have been sensitive to, and is implicit in not just in active thinking, but embedded and situated notions of cognition generally. But the introduction of these kinds of dynamic tools, which have this kind of characteristic to it, as you've explored towards the end of the talk there, that they are simultaneously used. They are tools that are simultaneously used by more than one user, right? So there's the consumer who is using the tool for a particular purpose, but it is a tool built and also continuously used by the corporation or the large institution that is presenting that tool for the use of others simultaneously. And so there's an examination of what intentionality is and how it gets drawn into that dynamic that becomes much more apparent and salient, that is present in other situations, but not in any way to the same extent. And it's just interesting to see that dynamic sort of arise. As to whether I have, in response to one of your last questions on the slides, I'm not sure if there's a better term than mid-tension. I understand where because it's on the sort of part of me was like, well, there is a sort of a notion of shared intentionality or co-tension, but we don't, that would seem to imbue agency, which we don't want to do. So it is, but in principle, I mean, if I'm understanding it correctly, mid-tension is something that, to a certain extent, is, it's a gradient. It's possible that it's there in other tools too. It's just that it's not going to be so salient because the other tools aren't so dynamic.
Yeah. there are many things. So let me start from the end, and this notion of when we approach the boundary of viability, we become more aware of subtle distinctions. Something is also happening here with authenticity. Of course, the boundaries of viability in human autonomy are very sophisticated. They're not about biologically dying, and obviously they're not purely sensomotor either. They are linguistic, social, personhood, political. They are deep. And so what is funny is a phenomenon that is happening more and more. At least I feel it myself, which is that we are developing a sensitivity to identify images that are being generated by AI, and they produce a kind of reaction that's rejection, right? So the uncanny valley effect on generative product. And if somebody emails me and the beginning of the email is I hope this email finds you well, I don't keep reading. This is going to change, obviously, but I think we are all developing a sophisticated meta capacity to distinguish ourselves or our authenticity from that of generative AI, and that's an interesting side effect. Uh, at the same time, we are blurring, and the machine is blurring with us in ways that might make this harder and harder in the future. And I think we also going to adapt and mimic the machine, because this is almost inevitable effect of any technological transformation of a society. I think the closest thing we've ever been to as humanity to this revolution is perhaps the invention and the spread of writing and books and or textuality in general. And so one of the effects, obviously, we can read Plato and other thinkers of the time where writing appeared, and the resistance to writing was very apparent because it has good things, but very dangerous things too. This is a disembodied way of sedimenting knowledge, and therefore you lose all the connection with the practices, with the living relationships, etc. And this is dangerous. But finally, most of us that have been educated in a writing environment, we speak, we organize our thinking, we organize our lives through textuality, and it's now impossible to separate. And that has homogenized language and has many effects on and limitations on the way of thinking. Perhaps musicality has been reduced. I don't know. I can't tell all the lacks and the difficulties we have thanks to writing, but we know all the benefits as well, and some kind of two-way effect of adapting to the machine adapting to us, and getting, and at the same time we are going to perhaps develop a more fine-grained sensitivity to the authenticity, perhaps. The ecological cost is very important, obviously, and the social and environmental energy. At some point, we're going to have to ask, where do we want this energy to be put? On the machines or on humans? Because it's not going to be enough for all. There's already not enough for all. We are in a very unique planetary scale society, and these inequalities will raise. As a consumer user, most of us are. Perhaps the cost is not that terrible right now, and the cost of the processing of a paragraph, let's say, and correction, if you want, grammatical correction of a paragraph, to put more neutral kind of, has come down dramatically, about 100 times from in the last 3 years, because of many techniques. The problem is the Jevons paradox. The problem is not how much is consumed in one conversation with ChatGPT, if you want it, but the fact that when the cost comes down and the infrastructure is so there's so much investment on this infrastructure, the need to make this infrastructure profitable and to expand this new market and this new economy based on AI is devastating. So the Jevons paradox is a paradox of technological development by which when you increase the efficiency of a machine, so it pollutes less or it consumes less, you end up using more of that machine and never consuming less but more. So it happens with cars. You have better engines that are more efficient, and it happens is the cars are bigger. They play music and have air conditioning, and your job is farther away, and you end up consuming more oil than before the optimization of the engine or whatever. So it's and so what is going to be the Jevons paradox of generative AI? It's could be terrible. And for the first time, we analyzed this paradox also in the paper with Lola, Transforming Agency. What is going to happen? Because last, I was going to say decade, but a few years ago, it didn't matter whether you were the CEO of Google or a teenager in Pakistan or a designer in Moscow. You could do almost the same with a computer. It wasn't a big difference. You know, any programming you could do, Python, whatever, was similar. Computers were too strong for a human user demands, unless you were editing videos super high quality, but that's the marginal use of it. But that's changed. Now, if you have computer resources, you can do much more because you could have an army of not a couple of agents doing things for you. I mean, a couple million agents doing whatever research for you, politics for you in social networks, whatever. And this is something that is new also, that's going to destroy the planet on the energy consumption and create huge social political inequalities, or increase the ones that already exist. So that's very concerning. So we should perhaps limit. On the other side, on the other hand, and I'll finish with this thought, I don't think we should go full ban on artificial intelligence. That'll be ridiculous for different reasons. But I don't think it's bad, intrinsically bad, to invest energy and resources on thinking. At one point on the evolution of life on Earth, we are the product of an over inverting on neurological and bodily encephalized brains that are sometimes suboptimal to quick reflexes on doing things. And so, and our brains expend 20% of the energy of the body, although they just 5% of the weight, right? So there is a big asymmetry on energy consumption on our body in favor of the brain. And I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. We are still far from those figures, the planetary technological productive scale. We still invest much more on fabrication or things, I don't know, other aspects, more muscular or vegetative aspects of planetary life rather than intelligence, like an abstract concept. What worries me, obviously, is the benefits in mammal bodies or highly developed, if you want, encephalized bodies. The benefit of having intelligence is for the whole body, and very often also for the environment, because you have more complex ecosystems, food webs, complex. I'm not sure we, as a humanity, we are doing as good as nature did on spreading the benefits of intelligence to the rest of the planet, and that'll be important for this revolution.
Yeah, it's a matter in which it seems that the research on how these things work and how to use them is being done live in ubiquitously rather than having been worked out in step by step in labs under sort of controlled and
Mhm.
managed conditions. So it's I'm not sure if there's an equivalent, if there is a it's almost like, if we had nuclear power and we're going to sort of figure out how nuclear power works by putting a micro reactor on the end of every residential street. And let's figure out how this goes, and we'll see how it goes. But I guess sort of to look more than just at some of the cognitive aspects of things, um, there was I guess the kind of a number of different facets to it that I'm curious to pick up on. So I don't want to get most of what I was picking out. I do have some queries about just. Can I go back to one of your earlier slides there, actually,
Mhm.
with the diagram where you first introduce and you describe them as nesting. So I think it's the
Yeah.
diagram before here. So here we've
Oh, wait a
the
second. There we go.
so we have that's it. So we have A and B, and so can I just check in terms of the diagram there,
Yeah.
um, what's nesting? So in the sense that ordinarily nesting would have a recursive facet to it or be a scale indifference, so something is nested inside another one entirely. Um, but there is there's it's partly just a nitpick, but it's also mostly just an opportunity to maybe articulate
Hmm.
a little bit more finely how the interaction between loops A and B are sort of occurring here. Because I guess in any of these, and you mention it in like you describe it in the diagram in the width versus depth diagram as well, that
Hmm.
of course at any given time we're involved in many different things, right?
Hmm.
So I'm writing a word, I'm writing a sentence, I'm writing a paragraph, I'm writing a paper, I'm developing my career, and those are very much clearly nested.
Hmm.
But the that would suggest that at any given time a tool is present at multiple widths rather than just at one.
Hmm.
And so if A and B are here are sort of isolable, and is nesting the right term here? Is there, or
Yeah,
is there?
maybe not. In Spanish, it will be entrelazar. I don't know exactly what is the appropriate term in English. I think nesting works, but it's limited and could be misinterpreted. But if okay, what I wanted to say by nesting is
Hmm.
kind of overlap, or the fact that loop B of the auto-regressive, so you have this large language model
Hmm.
is thinking aloud, if you want, or writing the response, and you know that whenever it delivers one new token, new word, it feeds on that and recursively produces the next one, and so on. And so we see this on our screen, and there's a loop there, and this loop is now connected with the loop of the human that is using the technology. So if I am writing an email and I have some kind of I don't use Copilot, Microsoft services. I don't exactly know how it works, but
Hmm.
if I'm suggested something, I don't know, nested or connected or retro actively feeding back or
Okay.
into my own loop, and both are connected. Then you have the issue of the temporal scales of nesting
Hmm.
in more expanded, uh, yeah, nesting, which is also important, and also generatively we will have many different examples of
Hmm.
how this could work. Yeah, I don't know if I replied to your question or comment.
No, that's fine. No, but well, essentially you have just in terms of just unpacking that relationship a little bit and sort of articulating it a little bit. So it's I guess I don't know whether weaving or braiding and somehow or something might be, um,
Braiding, yeah,
but
that'll be better.
um, Regardless, essentially, you have the right word in Spanish, and my Spanish is nowhere near as good as your English. So we're
Intertween. Yeah, intertween would have been a good one. Intertwined. I don't know. The loops are intertwined. I don't know. Maybe that makes sense better than nested.
and in that, in actually, so the idea of betweenness, I wonder whether almost that might be a be tended. Um, I'd be, I'd end up going very. I'd spend a lot of time trying to figure out what words might play. But of course, the issue with the introduction of these new terms is it's almost like the term itself is never going to be transparent because the concept is relatively new. You know, it's not a matter of finding the right term. It's just a matter of picking one and kind of following through and being consistent with it, and we'll all figure it out
Yeah.
eventually.
Yeah, I look maybe just to share this anxiety that I have because really there is a battle on the terminology, especially with this new hype on autonomous agents.
Mm.
Because we've been thinking and talking about autonomous agency for so long. I don't know. Surely since the Varela's principles of biological autonomy, and earlier, obviously, on the work he did with Maturana, and earlier with Hans Jonas Songershofer. And suddenly, the concept, the very notion, is kidnapped and captured by global tech capitalism as a service.
Mm.
I will deliver you autonomous agency at your service, and it's like, no. I mean, how much can we fight this? I mean, I tried, but the more I do, it's just like sometimes it's just yeah, we're not gonna win that
No.
terminological battle. Can
Well,
we suggest?
there will never be only one meaning for any given term.
Yeah,
You know, so they don't all have to be. So long as, but that's it. So long as we can track the context well enough, um,
yeah,
and those differences, and that'll be interesting to see. It's that issue of context and the presence of context in the training data for a lot of these LLMs is one of the interesting challenges, and will take some while to fully unpack. I think so. For in one of your very early slides, you talk about when you're talking about the thrice derived intentionality of LLMs, and you describe the purpose structured corpora that
yeah,
they're. And I did wonder about that. There's a that they are purpose structured because they're derived from essentially the fossils of human intention in text.
yeah.
Um, and I think there's a sort of important way in which that's true, but there's also an important way in which the a kind of an active purpose is holistic and in often totalizing, right? So when we're doing something,
Hmm.
nothing else, if we try to do two things at once, both will fail. Or we're always doing lots of different things, but only we're doing one very complicated thing that manages to find a balance between all of the different demands on us at a given time. So for example, both of us are here. We're having a conversation. We're doing it in English. We're oriented towards video cameras. We're managing posture. We're developing academic careers and managing bladder control and doing various other things.
Hmm.
But all of it unified in our and that's essentially what bodies do as much as anything else is they kind of unify and find some equilibrium or balance between all of these different pressures. But corpora don't do that. They aren't unified in that way, except that the models that are produced from them are abstract, sort of such that they've abstracted away from all of those. So I don't know enough about the analysis of corpora in the training process to know how well that abstractness can potentially keep the unity of purpose in all of the individual cases of the texts um, that that are produced. And so it kind of strikes me what crossed my mind was almost like the corpus that an LLM might be trained on If there is a purpose there, it's something very meta, unintended by any of the individuals who produced the actual utterances, the text that ultimately got incorporated. And it's almost like the text would have a purpose in the same way that the global energy and farming system has the purpose of climate change. It's something that is very much a kind of dynamically and directly generated outcome, but it's not intended by any of the individuals who actually participate. And so there's a difference in, this is, I think, purely probably just something to be unpacked and understood, rather than necessarily a kind of a denial of that there's purpose there. It's just that there's possibly another aspect to purpose or facet to it that needs to be unpacked a little bit.
Wow, many things to comment on. I agree, and I have some elaborations on. Well, first, well, considering holism, which I've been a very holistic person in general. Well, holistic person meaning a philosopher that thought that many of the properties we attribute to things, especially meaning, emergent from holistic configurations. You could not have an atomistic theory of language, for example, or combinatorial things like that.
Yeah.
And one thing that attracted me the most when I was a young philosopher, a student of philosophy degree, was that neural networks were kind of holistic in their structure compared to Chomskyan tree analysis or Fodorian kind of combinatorics of and all this tension between language of thought and connectionism that shaped my philosophy as well, and so large language models are fundamentally hyper-connected neural networks, artificial networks. I mean, they have very few of neural, but inspirationally neural networks. And the attention mechanism that made possible the revolution is one way also of connecting the input stream at different scales and almost everything with everything in different shapes. And so and the embedding is also highly dimensional. Everything is potentially connected with everything. So these machines are very holistic on their nature or whatever, on their mode of being, if you want. Obviously, there's hardware-software dichotomy is there, and this is also very important to consider because it has many consequences on lack of precariousness of material depth or of surprising chaotic elements, but they are more and more digitally deep, and new emergent properties, at least skills or ways of functioning, emerge because of trillion parameters. It's just mind-blowing amount of things that can generate things unpredictable and have depth as much as a trillion atoms governed by deterministic laws or non-deterministic, but it doesn't matter. Very simple laws can give rise to truly emergent autonomous systems. I don't know to which extent at least it is to be explored what could come out of this digital depth that we have built as computational infrastructure, and the kinds of holism that can take place there. The corpora, obviously, that's a very interesting comment of yours. The corpora as a whole doesn't have one intention. It has many and conflicting intention, because even also a human, I have many conflicting identities in myself, and I have to balance all of them. And I have one single body that pushes me to integrate as well as possible, and social identities that also shape it and manage the chaos and force me to be consistent. But this is not something we could expect fully from generative AI, but they are very capable of assuming roles. And so I would say they are not shaped by a single intentional holistic unity, but they are shaped by many, and they are capable of well, they are not capable, but they can generate streams of tokens or signs that manifest or get structured in individualizable intention from the conflicting ones they have inherited. So, and I mean, to be honest, if I were to invest, which I do, when I have the time to explore deeper and active turns and on the evolution of these theories, I think that I would take two avenues that I've mildly and very, 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 I mean, in the very early stages of exploring avenues to expand. And maybe this is a good way of finishing the conversation. Future of activism in relation to these topics. One of my bets, one of the avenues of research will be to get involved with philosophy of religion, because these artifacts are almost religious in the sense that the Bible became the textual synthesis of many conflicting intentional wisdom that was sedimented on a book that is self-contradictory and is still so powerful on its potential, right? And so I'm not a religious person myself, but I think the philosophy of religion is close to develop some of the conceptual resources to think this new configuration of humanity with big tech corporations, big also technical devices. Doesn't we don't have to let them be exclusively monopolized by corporations. There are good examples, both in Spain and in Europe, of publicly funded large language models that are, I think, are very valuable. Also, open weight models that can be reappropriated in many ways. So it'd be nice to see also all the ways in which religious practices demonopolized or managed polytheist pantheons, or democratically managed the interpretation of the Bible, or expanded on animistic rituals of different kinds. I think we have to explore this in the digital age as well. And the second avenue would be, I know in activism has gone through different turns, right? The Jonassian turn, the Simondonian turn. I think we are in the middle of the Deleuzian turn as well, because it's becoming more relevant in different senses. And perhaps, I don't know. I just read a few texts, secondary texts, people that are thinking about ChatGPT through the lenses of Derrida, because all the signs, all the importance of the signs that are there sedimenting intentionality, are also overwriting intentionality and getting remixed. I think there is something to be explored there, but something for the future.
That's and that they both sound like very interesting things to explore for the future. I love the irony of it. I can only imagine that the text bros would shrivel in horror at the notion that Derrida had anything to teach about the state of artificial intelligence or its potential uses or applications. But it'll certainly be interesting to see that kind of thing develop. I certainly hope you get the time soon, Xabier.
I will slowly. I will, and it'll be great to share as well in the
Yeah,
future, and
absolutely.
also to generatively, collectively, and socially build this theory as I've done in the past. I'm hoping to do in the future.
Brilliant. Well, a wonderful place to finish, Xabier, looking to the future, and one with some absurdly very interesting work in it. So thanks a million for sharing your work with us today, and for coming on with us. And to everyone watching, we're going to take our regular winter hiatus now, but we will be back in February with another ENSO seminar.
Excellent. Thank you very much for carrying and organizing everything, Mike.
Thanks, Xabier. Now we are finished on